Hello everyone and welcome, my name's Ali. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new PlayStation 4 controller, comparing it with the Xbox One controller, seeing which features one controller has that the other one may not, and essentially just taking a look at the new next generation controllers for you guys. There are also videos on my channel directly comparing these controllers with their predecessors, so PlayStation 4 versus the PS3, Xbox One versus the Xbox 360, so make sure you're checking those out as well. There'll also be an unboxing of both consoles here on my channel and gameplay for both, so make sure you're checking them out and subscribing for more video content. Probably the key things to check out and to focus on within this video is going to be the differences in the analog sticks, the new triggers on either controller and how they both feel, and of course the differences in terms of what they both offer. So in terms of what these controllers offer that the other one may not, on the PlayStation 4 we have an actual touchpad that acts as a single button as well. That is not available on the Xbox One. We have an actual mini speaker on the PlayStation 4 DualShock 4 controller. That is not available on the Xbox One. We have a direct headphone jack on the PlayStation 4 controller, which you can plug in any sort of headphone, which is quite neat. However, on the Xbox One, that's not available. What we have here is its separate own link for Xbox One chat and for different headsets, essentially. And then the differences between these controllers in terms of power. You can power the Xbox One controller by battery or by wired. The PS4 controller needs to be plugged in or needs to at least be charged to be used. Slight differences there as well. In terms of the buttons, however, if we go to the triggers, there are slight differences there. I'll cover that in a second. Then we have a look on the back. Both are actually plugged in via micro USB cables. The PlayStation 4 rocking a coloured sensor here at the front of the controller, which is registered for different games. If there's multiple controllers on, there'll be different colours used. So some additional features there on the PlayStation 4 controller. But all these additional features don't really matter if the controllers don't feel nice to hold. Now, in terms of comparisons, in terms of size, if we take a look at these side by side, the PlayStation 4 controller is actually a little bit wider. For the previous version controllers for the older generation, the PlayStation 3 controller was standard, was smaller. So the PlayStation 4 controller is now larger, the Xbox One a little bit smaller. If we have a look sideways, we can see in terms of height that the Xbox One controller is a little bit bigger, but not by much. They're almost similar in terms of height there. So in terms of size and in terms of holding them, they're both going to be pretty similar. Now, in terms of along the edges of the controller, if we take a look at that and compare them side by side to actually get a look at how these look on the edge, the PlayStation 4 controller sticks out a little bit more. The Xbox One's a little bit flatter. So with the PlayStation 4 controller, it feels like you're holding it a little bit more. With the Xbox One, it feels like it's more to sort of placed on your hand because of that sort of design. But it's how you prefer, and I definitely recommend that you at least try these yourselves. But this video is just going to try and give you an overview for these controllers. So before we move on to the important part in terms of triggers and analog sticks, in terms of the buttons on the front here, we have the menu button and the view button. On the Xbox One, we have the options button and the share button. The share button will allow you to actually share gameplay, screenshots and such like that, just by instantly pressing that button. The Xbox One does have the ability to share gameplay and screenshots as well through the console, but this isn't a direct button to go straight to that. In terms of the D-pad, we have separate individual buttons that are protruding out of the controller on the PlayStation 4. However, it's one piece of plastic underneath. On the Xbox One, we have 4 different directions, but it's one piece of plastic on top and underneath. They both feel very, very similar. They click down like standard directional pads. Not too much of a difference there. The Xbox One D-pad is a little bit smaller in size. The PlayStation 4 is a little bit bigger. Now, in terms of the 4 buttons on the edge here, they're just standard. You're going to be pressing them down for various games most of the time, and there isn't much of a difference there at all. But the important part is the actual analog sticks and the triggers. Now, specifically for the analog sticks, these have been changed quite a lot on both controllers, and there's actually some interesting differences. So on the older generation controllers, the Xbox 360 analog sticks were a little bit stiffer, had a little bit more resistance when you were moving them around. And the PlayStation 3 controller was very much free. It was quite loose for any of you guys that had used that and had noticed that for yourself. However, it's actually been reversed on these controllers. So the Xbox One analog stick is quite loose, not much resistance. You can move it around very, very freely. And the PlayStation 4 controller has a little bit more resistance and is a little bit tougher to move around. Now, this is pretty much up to personal preference. It's interesting how they've both been switched though in terms of how much resistance there are on both the analog sticks, but definitely something worth noting, especially for first-person shooters. You're going to be getting a lot quicker movement on this analog stick and arguably perhaps more accuracy because of the more resistance and the ability to be a little bit more precise on the PlayStation 4 using these analog sticks. Now, in terms of the actual shape of the analog sticks, the Xbox One controller thumbsticks, if you have a look at it here, is actually inward facing and indenting, and you've got this grip around the edge, a very nice textured grip, I would say, but the actual size of the head is a lot smaller than the Xbox 360 head was, so a slightly smaller controller thumbstick overall. If we then take a look at the actual PlayStation 4 thumbstick, we can see that it actually is slightly rounded in the middle with a raised edge part, and we actually have the ability again to place our fingers on the edge with that slightly angled design if we wish, and if that's how you like to hold your thumbsticks, you can do so. Now, there's actually differences I've noticed between the two controllers in terms of the actual feel. So the the PlayStation 4 controller is a very tough piece of plastic. It doesn't move very much. If you push into it, it's not going to sort of take the pressure or anything. It's just going to stay that shape. However, the Xbox One controller, if you push into it a little bit, has a little bit of sort of bounce to it. It's a little bit softer. And personally, when I hold the controller, when I'm playing first-person shooter games, because I'm sprinting forward a lot, I'm going to be pushing into the controller quite hard. So the Xbox One controller doesn't hurt my thumb quite as much. One thing I have noticed with the PlayStation 4 controller is that because it's so stiff, my thumb starts to ache after a little bit. However, talking about thumbsticks, that can be completely irrelevant because I actually use control freaks on my right analog stick. So the shape to me isn't massively important because what I'm doing, if we take a look at these control freaks are essentially controller add-ons, and they give you the extra ability to have greater angle on the thumbsticks. So if we have a look at the thumbstick here, we can see that it's quite low down. In terms of the actual distance moved, it's quite short. When you add on this thumbstick here, the distance you're moving is increased, meaning greater accuracy and greater precision. I definitely recommend these. You can get several different designs. There'll be a link in the description to pre-order the new control freaks for both the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 because the size of the heads have changed since the previous console, so you're going to need the brand new next generation version of the control freaks. Just something I would worth recommending. You can use Allier to get 10% off. Even if you've never tried them before, I definitely recommend them, especially with the new analog sticks that have now been released with these new controllers. It would definitely be worth giving them a go and just seeing what you think of them. So, analog sticks covered there. In terms of height, they're almost identical in terms of how far they go above the controller. I'd say the Xbox One's a little bit higher. The PlayStation 4 analog sticks have been lowered a little bit for this controller, so that's a little bit lower, but not much difference there. Now having a look at the actual triggers, we definitely have some differences here, and this is going to be quite interesting. So with the PlayStation 3, it was said that the actual triggers were annoying because they were just flat. Your finger could actually fall off them when you were holding onto the triggers like so. However, the PlayStation 4 triggers have now got this nice curve to it. They fit in your finger very, very nicely. And you get a sort of mini click. It feels like you've pressed it all the way down once you go and press the trigger all the way to the bottom. You've then got a standard click button for L1 and R1 on the top. Very standard buttons, work well, feel nice. On the Xbox One, we've got a slightly larger trigger button here that comes out even more. When you press it down, you get a little bit of resistance when you're pressing it down, so it feels like you're pressing more of a trigger. With the PlayStation 4, it just goes straight down, whether or not that's something you mind or not. However, within these triggers, it actually has rumbles. So it means when you're playing different games, such as first-person shooters or racing games, if you go off the track in a racing game, or if you get shot in a first-person shooter, depending on how the designers have coded the game, of course, there will actually be rumbles that will go off within these triggers, giving you feedback. And it's actually pretty cool, especially for racing games when you go off the track, to get this feedback through the triggers is very, very nice indeed. A larger button overall, as you can see, it comes out as flat on the edge here and then sort of comes out here, so you can press on the edge or directly on the button if you so wish. The difference is with the button on the top here is that it's one sort of piece of plastic that actually sort of melts into the design of the Xbox One controller itself. And these need to be pressed on the edges or in the middle. You can't really press them right on the top. They're definitely bigger buttons in terms of length compared to the PlayStation 4 buttons, which you can see are a little bit smaller. The buttons on the Xbox One controller are definitely a little bit bigger there. So we've pretty much covered everything in terms of how they grip. The Xbox One controller goes in a little bit more, so it feels like your hands are going towards each other a little bit more. A little bit smaller grip actually compared to the PlayStation 4. Of course, the analog sticks, you've got the right one on the bottom right, and then the left one is actually in the top left. And then for the PlayStation 4, you've got two analog sticks, both at the bottom for both of the thumbs, and then the actual edges of the controller is a little bit more flat, so it feels like you're just placing your hands on the side and then gripping it like such. But hopefully we've covered everything there for you guys. If you've got any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. As I said, make sure you're checking out the Control Freaks to add onto your controllers. It will definitely help you, especially if you play first-person shooters, or also racing Control Freaks, sport Control Freaks. Lots of different ones to check out. But thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you've enjoyed. Let me know which controller you prefer currently in the comment section down below. It'd be very interesting to know. Make sure you're subscribed and checking out more videos here on my channel of both these next generation consoles, and I'll see you on my next video.